Geocachamaniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Welcome to episode 345 of the GeoGearHeads. We're talking today with Scubacaching. I'm Daryl W4 back again with Chris of the Northwest, and our special guest tonight is Merlin 1392. Welcome back.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I love it when users put their birth years in their usernames. I think it's just very helpful.
I've been accused of that. Thank you very much, Chris.
Okay. No problem. Happy to help. Oh, wait, that's probably not where your 1392 came from.
No, but you know, that would be really handy for a diver to know, because then you'd have some inside information, I would suspect, on where some of those shipwrecks are.
Ooh.
See, that's the most fun.
Diving on shipwrecks?
Yes.
That's the ultimate geocaching, right?
Well, that's where most of the caches are hidden. So,
well,
yes.
And there's some serious swag there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
See, that's what I always wanted to do, was those shipwrecks. That seemed like the most interesting of the dives.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have geocaching, which has its own interesting dives.
We do, and we've gone completely off of the thing that I was ready to talk about. So,
fine.
How do we get this back? Yeah, thank you, Chris. How do we get this back around to where my notes are?
we're here to talk about dive bars tonight.
Oh, okay.
And wait, no.
Dive bars,
dive bars. Yeah.
Oh well, bars are a European measure of how much air is left in your tank.
Ooh. So
actually, diving with bars is good.
Diving after going to the bar is not so good.
No, not so good. No, okay. Not so good. Not so good. So,
but this is not the first time that we will have talked about scuba caching, though apparently we're not going to really talk about it tonight either. But back on episode 71, which was more than 5 years ago, we talked about it with Clay Jar. So it's been a long time. It's well overdue. So when we talked with you last, you mentioned that you were a diver and like to do dive caches and had some of your own. And I was like, yeah, we've got to get you on. So it was pretty much, I think, the next day we had this show scheduled.
Yeah, it was. And as Chris and I were talking about, I do work for a public school here in Michigan. And today is my last day of 4 by 10 hour days. And so I have Friday off. And so it allows me to stay up late, talk to you guys, have fun, and I get to sleep in the morning. So
I'm jealous.
Yeah, that makes it all the better. So.
But you've had a good summer off, right?
Yeah.
We talked about that. No, we don't get summer off. No. It's actually busier because that's when we put in our big projects.
Right.
We can't do during the school year. Yep.
Right. So when they all come back, then I say that's great, because I just have to take care of onesie twosie little problems. We don't do any big projects and stuff like that. So that's when I go. Actually, I do go diving more in October and November to get away from, that's my vacation time, and I go in the spring as well. This is the second time, my second season, because when we're closed for the holidays over that December, January thing, that's when, again, we do a lot of projects, so I can't take time off. So I go around that. So I do a lot of diving. And of course, that's what we're here to talk about. And I did play episode 71 way back when, and I learned about Clay Jar. I have some answers. And Chris, I have an answer for you.
Oh, I'm so glad. Now, remind me what the question is.
Well, last week you were talking about travel caching with C. Michelle.
Yes.
And talking about road signs that told you where you were between states or when you were entering another state. Mm-hmm. And there's that bridge that goes between Washington and Oregon, I think you were saying it is. Okay. So if you're a scuba diver and you want to brave the cold water of that area, which is, I'll never do that. you have at least one problem if you come up on the Washington side of the bridge, because their law enforcement officers don't like that. If you come up on the Oregon side, you have the Oregon PD to worry about. And if you come up in the middle, it becomes a federal offense.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so as Daryl and I were talking, probably Homeland Security would be involved in there. And so you have 4 different, LEOs that you would have.
Wow. That's the mighty Columbia that rolls between Oregon and Washington. Okay. And yes, it's cold and fast.
Yeah, so it's probably not a good idea for a diver to go try to get the picture of that.
So, okay, so obviously it's not illegal to dive in the Columbia.
No.
But say you start on the Oregon side, you go dive, you come back out on the Oregon side, there's no problem.
Correct.
But if you were to swim across into Washington, you have an issue?
No, but if you climbed up on the bridge on the Washington side.
Oh, gotcha.
You would have an issue.
Right.
Yeah, no, you can do that. Okay. We have that problem here in the Detroit River. You can swim halfway out in the river and you're in Michigan, the United States. The other half of the river, you're in Canada.
Right.
And so you have to have your passport with you when you're diving.
Do you really?
No, I'm kidding.
Okay. I know. I actually, it wouldn't surprise me if you popped up and.
If you pop up on the Canadian side, the Canadian people will stop you and ask you what you're doing. And yes, the fishermen do that all the time here.
Okay.
So yeah, they don't like that. So
okay, you got me on that one. But that was a really good answer.
Thank you. And I thought it was a great question leading into this week's show. It gave me something to open with.
Love it.
And you guys went away.
I'm still here.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
I don't see Daryl moving. Maybe he's just really intense.
He is. He's a very intense kind of guy. He's the the brains behind this. So,
well, he's something in the schemes of everything.
Okay.
Okay. So, really, I mean, is scuba caching and dive caching pretty much the same thing? You're going to need special equipment, right?
They are, and yes, you do. And I think the semi-official name is called dive caching. If you search on dive caching, you will find a website, and you will find a logo, which is kind of a drop of water with a geocaching logo in it. That is the semi-official dive caching logo.
Okay.
And I think I gave you one of my path tags when we saw each other at Woodstock. That actually has both of the logos on it.
Oh, okay.
So that's where that came from. And I think Daryl put up one of the pictures. If anybody can see that, that's a dive cache, and there's a diver there, and that is in the Cayman Islands. That's the first dive cache I ever found.
Nice.
Yeah. So you can find, one of the things you talked about last time was, how do you find a dive cache? Because the GPSs don't work real well underwater. They still don't work real well underwater. So for this one, it says, go to the stern, go to this angle for so many feet, and you'll find it. And I was on the right side of the boat, the starboard side, and I'm looking in all these portholes. I got my flashlight going, and we're down about 90 feet, and I'm looking and looking and looking. And I'm the only geocacher on our trip, but everybody knows that I'm looking for this geocache. And so another diver from our group is over on the other side of the boat, and he comes up and signals me and gives me this square box, come here. Mm-hmm. I know what he's found. So he found it for me, and then I went and opened it up. And it's a great big Pelican box. It's meant to be left underwater, and there's a slate inside. Most good divers will carry a slate, and you can see the white thing on my arm there is a slate with a pencil. And so I can sign the log. I put a little rubber duck in it and closed it back up and left it for the next one.
Okay, so explain this slate and a pencil, because it's not your standard logbook, right? I mean, you're not even using Write in the Rain paper because, well, you're completely underwater.
Correct. Although there's a logbook for you, Chris. That's a real log.
Okay, there is a picture of a logbook. Hey, I got to find a way to share these now that Daryl's not here.
I don't know if Daryl's not here
right now.
Oh, there's Daryl.
Yes, I am here. I was just checking on stream issues.
Oh, I thought we had lost you.
No.
Okay, so there's an actual logbook
Correct.
that looks like a standard spiral bound logbook. I assume it's not paper, but a derivative of paper.
Yeah, it's a plastic paper. It's the Right in the Rain or something that won't dissolve underwater. This cache was placed in 2013, so it's been there for a while.
Wow.
And when I opened it up, this is the first time I ever found a logbook inside of a dive cache.
Okay.
And again, had my pencil with me, and it's kind of like the pencil is a regular pencil.
Oh, okay.
So, I opened up the logbook, I signed my name. Unfortunately, that one, that particular cache I found during a tropical storm. So
interesting.
We spent about 10 minutes underwater and got out of there because it wasn't the best of conditions to dive in, but I had to get that cache before I was going home.
We have a question in the chat. This comes from Bounce. He says 90 feet is fairly deep if you want to stay down long. Were you diving with mixed gases?
No, I'm a recreational diver. And so, one of the topics you guys talked about last time and I was ready to talk about tonight is you can be a technical diver or a recreational diver. A recreational diver generally goes with standard air, or you can get a mix that has a little bit higher oxygen level in it and it less wear and tear on the body in that way, or you can go mixed gas. Now, there's a cache in Florida that I don't remember the GC number on it, but it is only for technical divers because it's 284 feet.
Wow.
And they tell you, please do not leave trackables down here because there's, probably 5% of the dive community can get it.
Yeah.
And so
is it found even once a year? Are we talking like once every 5 years?
Probably once every 3 years, I think, is what that one gets found. It's not found a lot. So dive caches as a whole aren't found a lot.
Right.
And, Daryl was asking me before, he's like, okay, so tell me a little bit about your caching profile. So I have found 3,000 caches and I've placed 16 caches. Now, leaving out the event caches that I've done, I have 4 caches that are on land, 8 caches that are underwater.
Okay.
So that's where I cache more. So, and they vary from 15 feet to 80 feet. A recreational diver is capable of diving down to right around 120 feet without any issues. For me, a tank of air will last about an hour.
Oh.
If I don't go any deeper than 30 feet.
Okay.
Because again, the deeper you go, the tank compresses, you're still breathing a volume of air, and there's all kinds of science and all of that.
Well, we should talk a little bit about the gear you need for dive caching. I mean, I assume it's more than, a mask and a snorkel tube.
Well, yeah. Again, it kind of depends on the cache. To get ready for the show, I did do a pocket query on 5.5s because generally dive caches are 5.5s. And I clicked on the scuba attribute, which of course attributes only get used properly couple of times. And I came up with 38 caches within 12,000 miles of me.
Oh.
In Michigan. So there's not a lot.
No, there is not.
No. There's 6 of them in Michigan, and I own 4 of them. There's 4 of them in Illinois, and I own 3 of those. So there's not a lot.
No, so the good news is because there's so few, if you're a diver, you actually could conceivably get all of the caches in your state and a neighboring state.
Yes, you could. Yes, that would be, the thing. And part of what I don't understand is, we look at the number of caches that are on land, only 30% of the surface of the world is covered by land.
Yes.
There's way more opportunity to put caches underwater than there are on land. So let's go back to your question of what do you need to be a scuba cacher? First thing you need is to be certified scuba diver. And then that requires a class, some pool work. We teach you how to, actually, when we open up our classes, and I'm about ready to teach one at a local college in a couple of weeks, we intro the course by saying, we're not going to teach you how to dive. We're going to teach you how not to kill yourself while you're underwater.
Well, that's a good place to start, actually.
Yeah, because it's really easy to die underwater if you do things wrong. So you need an air tank, and you need a regulator that can keep the air in the tank at its comfortable pressure while you can breathe it in your comfortable pressure. A mask so you can see underwater, and then fins to propel yourself. And I think Daryl has the other picture up. That one's in Honduras as well. That's a virtual cache. So there's a little ball underwater, and that's yours truly.
You went to Honduras and you found a ball.
I did. We had a ball in Honduras.
You had a ball. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been to the Cayman Islands. I've been to Bahamas. Everywhere I go diving, the first thing I do is look to see if there's a dive cache. The second thing is, after you spend so many hours underwater, you have to spend so many hours on land before you can fly. It has to do with the nitrogen absorption in the body.
Sure.
So usually the Friday before you fly out on Saturday, you can't go diving.
Right.
So I go geocaching.
Oh, that's, I'm so sorry.
I know.
You have to do that old-fashioned land caching.
Yeah. But I get to see new places and, things that I've never done before. So it all works out in the end. So another question that you actually had about, if you were with a diver and the diver finds a dive cache, do you still get credit for it?
Well, if you're out there helping, I don't have a problem with it. If you're providing support for the diver, I don't have an issue with it. If you're sitting on land and waiting for them to sign it and come back to you, I don't know if I could claim that one.
Yeah, and I think you're right too. It's kind of like sending the kid up the tree to sign the log, and all of us old people standing around the bottom going, I can't do that anymore, but take credit for the cache. So
right.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I like that. So
as long as you're near ground zero and maybe you've solved the puzzle and you're sending the diver out. Now, I'll go into a brief story. I know I've talked about it before, but the closest unfound cache to me for years was a scuba cache.
Oh.
And I'm not a certified scuba diver. And it would just taunt me there on my pocket queries. So I eventually put it on my ignore list. But I should have put it on my watch list and seen if anybody was planning to come and find it. I could go join them. I'll swim out with you to it. I just won't be able to go down the 40 feet.
Right.
To go get it. But,
Did you get it, or you're still ignoring it?
No, it's actually been archived since then because I wouldn't find it.
Okay.
GeoGearHeads.com has finally archived it for me.
Well, that was really nice of them.
Well, that's the power I have.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Very cool.
Here's a question for you, because
sure,
dive caches are going to take more effort than your traditional, walk into the woods kind of cache. Not as much as probably one of those like 1-day hikes that you hear about in Australia. But what would you say is like the minimum time just to get the gear out, get suited up, get down and get back? So if you're planning a day of caching, this is probably going to take at least a couple of hours, right?
Oh yeah. The couple of caches that I have here at a lake close to me, the lake is about 20 minutes away. And to really get the gear out, set up, get dressed and ready to go in the water, typically is a 20 to 30 minute adventure. And then maybe 15 minutes or so to get out to the cache site. but then you don't really want to come back. And that's one of the things of dive caching. And actually, one of the challenges with HQ in the rules is that, no cache can be within 528 feet of another. On land, 528 feet is not a big deal. 528 feet underwater, think about swimming 10 laps of a swimming pool. And that's how you have to go to just get your next cache. So power trails don't exist underwater. And, you might get 2 caches if you're lucky. And again, it's how deep are the caches and how much air does it take to get them. Now, in this particular lake, it's Baptist Lake here in Michigan. There's 2 caches there. One's at 25 feet, the other's at 35 feet. So I can be underwater for an hour. And I can get both of those caches and I can tour the park. And the thing I really love about diving is getting underwater, the weightlessness feeling, just exploring the environment. That is so cool. It's like taking a walk in the woods when there's nobody around. And so that's just whether I'm with one person or 15 people, you really are on your own underwater. And that's just so relaxing that it doesn't matter how many caches I find. But then, okay, so you give it an hour for a tank of air, and then you got another 20 minutes or so of taking the gear apart, getting it loaded up in the car. And for me, when I get home, then I put it in the shower and I rinse it off. Even if it's fresh water, I get all of the gunk and muck and stuff that I've been in, hang it up to dry and let it sit. So for me, it's an all-day affair to go get 1 or 2 dive caches.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was afraid of. It's not the kind of thing, okay, we're going to go do all of the caches in this area, and you can go do this dive cache for us, and we're going to go do all the ones around, and then we'll meet up and continue on. It's not something that you could even really do like that.
Yeah, no, it's kind of an adventure that you'd go out for that. And so, well, and one of the other ways to do caching, and when you talk about puzzle solving, one of the caches I created out here actually is a puzzle. So you have to find landmarks, and then you use compass directions to go from land to find this cache site underwater. Or you can, what I've set up is I put the GPS in a watertight bag, and then I put that watertight bag on my dive flag, and I'll swim out on the surface till I find the coordinates, drop a weight down, follow the line down, and usually I'm pretty close to where I need to be. So one of the other fun things that we have is I have this mallard duck decoy. And if I'm diving at a scuba park down in Illinois, I don't need a dive flag. So I take my duck, and my duck wears my GPS. Well, when I'm underwater and you pull on the string for a decoy, what does a decoy do?
Quack.
Well, it pops up.
Wow.
So yeah, the duck becomes a diving duck. So I went out to, it's a shallow cache, but it's on the far side of the lake, and I had my duck with me. And when I got back to the beach area, I had like 4 people come up to me and say, "Oh, you're the duck guy. Do you realize you had 4 ducks following that duck?" And we couldn't figure out why it was diving all the time and coming back up. And so, yeah, it was a hilarious story. That so now my duck and I are infamous down at the quarry and for finding caches.
That's awesome.
Mr. Duckman, now you'll have to excuse my ignorance. Let's start off with, how much does a bottle of air cost you?
Do I have to buy the bottle or just the air?
Well, if you're going to refill your tank, what does that cost?
$7.
$7. Do you have multiple tanks that if you wanted to stay longer, you could?
Yes.
Okay.
Although carrying extra bottles is hard.
Sure.
So usually I will dive with one tank, make it last as long as it can, and then I'll either come to the boat, rest and relax, get another tank and go back down, or we'll come back to land, grab another tank, go back out. Okay. I own 5 tanks.
Oh, okay.
So I can do that. I own lots of stuff. It's kind of silly. While geocaching, it might be free, dive caching is not free at all.
Exactly.
So yeah, you're going to have a fair amount of investment in scuba diving for all of the gear that you'll want and need.
Do you always go with somebody or take somebody with you? Generally,
yes. I do have a certification that allows me to dive by myself.
Oh, okay.
But it's really not a recommended practice. I've done it on a couple of occasions where my buddies have left or the buddies have not arrived at the site yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll go out and tool around. But when I do that, I'm extra careful and extra cautious, and I have extra gear that I carry with me. So that's part of the whole learning to scuba dive process. Is there's an entry level course which gets you into it. And then there's a lot of learning on top of it, which is really just how to not kill yourself. So, what will happen to your body when you dive deeper than 60 feet? If you understand that, you can deal with it more regularly. If you're going to be by yourself, and often I am because I'm a dive master. And when I take new students out into the lake that maybe have 1 or 2 dives under their belt, can I really expect them to help me if I have a problem? Probably not.
Right. No.
So I have to learn how to take care of myself first, all by myself, and I can provide help to somebody else if they need it on a dive.
Interesting. So,
yeah, a buddy and I actually created a dive caching certification.
Really?
Yeah. So if you're a part of the PADI program, the Professional Association of Dive Instructors, if you're part of their program, an instructor can teach and you can get a certification card in dive caching. And we talk about what caching is, how you do caching, how to do it underwater, what are some of the risks when you're scuba caching underwater, because one of the big risks is not realizing either how deep you are or how much air you've got left because you want to find that cache. And running out of air at 80 feet below the surface is not a good thing.
Right.
Kind of shortens the life expectancy a little bit.
Exactly. Wow.
Just a little bit?
Only a little. So yeah, one of the deadliest dive seasons just occurred in Florida at the end of July. It's called the lobster mini season. And it's 2 days of going out and hunting lobsters with dive cache. And people forget how to dive. They forget watching their air because they're after a lobster.
Mm.
And granted, lobster is very tasty, but you can't forget.
But you have to be alive to eat it.
Yeah. You have to have all those rules. So, yep.
I think I need those rules when caching on land. There's times I go out and I think, am I going to come back alive?
Yeah, I just did one the other day that was up on a hill, and it has a rope to climb up to it. And I wasn't sure I was going to make it, but it was only a 4.5. So,
yeah.
And I had to be here on the show, so I had to survive that one.
Well, thank you for putting the show at that level of importance in your life, because really that's where it should be.
I understand, and since I met you guys down in Cincinnati, it's just been a whirlwind of, excitement and all the rest of that, whatever I'm trying to figure out.
Now, in the beginning, you mentioned the cache, the first picture that we had showed there, which was not an otter box, a pelican case. And that, you go to the stern of the ship and then you take this angle that sounds a lot like a letterbox. Is that similar to many dive caches that they will give you, here's the main landmark you're looking for, because as you mentioned, GPS doesn't work underwater, and then give you directions to the cache?
Yeah, I guess I would have to say yes. And again, it depends on where you are and what the CO has planned for. Um, in I have 3 caches in this one quarry area, and I do all 3 a little bit differently. So one, I give you coordinates, and that's all I give you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's only 25 feet deep. So you can swim around for a while and stay at the surface, find the coordinates, drop down, find the cache. The other one is 80 feet below sea. Now, if you're a regular open water diver, your training allows you to go to 60 feet. So in the cache page, I say, if you're not a deep certified diver, please don't go after this cache. If you are with an instructor, then go ahead, and it's in the 80-foot section. Well, the 80-foot section is about a 30-foot round hole. So I don't really give you any more than drop down to the 80-foot section and you'll find it. So the third cache, I do, jump in the water at this platform, swim at this degree bearing for X number of feet, and you'll find the cache. So they're all a little bit different. And I think it kind of depends on what the CO, but yeah, the letterbox probably is the best global way to describe a dive cache.
Okay.
Well, and one of the interesting things was the containers, because I envisioned most of the stuff being like that Pelican, but you actually sent a photo in of a ammo can. And then I think based on the numbers you gave us, that just because there's one ammo can, that's still a higher percentage of ammo cans for dive caches than for caches on land.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. If you're scrolling through them again, you will find it. But yeah, that was again the last one we found in Honduras with the. But that one had the logbook in it, and there it is. So usually, what I will use is kind of a mixed nut jar. Without plugging the National Red Circle people, because I don't know if we can promote other places that I buy. They make this this jar of like trail mix, and it comes in like a gallon jar with a fairly sizable lid. And it's really nice that you can cut a hole in the bottom of it, put a rope on it, and then I usually put the rope down on a cinder block. So it gives you something nice to find. And I have about a 4x6-inch slate that I put in the cache itself, so you have something to sign when you find it. And that is a regular size container.
Mm-hmm.
So
let me get this picture. Of course, the cinder block sinks. Does the cache container float at the end of the rope, or does it sit on the bottom and just moves with the current?
When I've gone back to check on them to do maintenance, most of them are just kind of rolling around at the end of the rope.
Okay.
But
you can't really have the air in the cache container, because as soon as it's open, it's going to escape. So if it's going to float, you'd have to have some kind of flotation device. And you don't have to worry about the cache being watertight because, well, it's underwater and filled with water anyway.
Right.
All right. So, but one of them I have in a very high weedy area. So the cinder block keeps the cache from walking away and making it easier for somebody to grab and just, put it in a different place. So that's really for the placement for ground zero. But then a lot of times I'll take like the 4-ounce Gatorade bottle and I'll put some yellow paint in it and let that float off of the cinder block. So because it's in a high weed area, I'll put it just above the weeds so you can see it. Make it a little bit easier.
Some kind of visual marker, since it's almost impossible to go very far when you're hunting for a cache underwater.
Yeah. I mean, it's a high enough difficulty getting there in the first place that you don't want to make it super difficult to find. But, even this ammo can, I'm looking at it, and I would expect within several months, a year, it's going to look just like all the surroundings. Yes, it'll have a different shape. It'll be unnaturally square, but it will blend in and you won't be able to see it easily.
Right. Well, and that one was so funny because that ammo can has moved from where the cache page tells you it is. The cache page tells you it's in one of the holds, of the ship.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, I'm diving in what is near hurricane conditions. It's my buddy and I. We can't see anything for about the first 10 feet in the water column. We get down and it's still kind of murky where we're down here for this cache. And I'm looking in all the holds. And once again, the dive master signals me and he kind of points to the deck. And I'm like, oh, I wasn't looking there for it. And oh, it's right there. So this was actually published in FDF magazine this month. They talked about exotic locations. And so I sent this in, and a friend of mine said, I wonder how long that ammo can is going to last. And I'm like, well, that cache was placed in May of 2013. So it's lasted 5 years now. And it's found pretty much once a month. So it can go for a lot longer.
Interesting. Well, ammo cans are tough, and you see shipwrecks down there from hundreds of years. So,
well, and it's probably not going to rust because there's no air for it to rust.
Right.
You just have to worry about the other kinds of corrosion.
Exactly.
Yeah, that one's getting pretty crusted with coral, and the coral could make a bond so that the cache wouldn't open up anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think with regular opening, it's not going to have a problem.
Yeah,
what do you determine regular opening?
Oh, something around that.
Yeah. Maybe if it stays for 3 months, it would start, becoming one with the coral.
It might. So one of the other questions was, how do you get into dive caching, or how do you learn to be a scuba diver?
Tell me, how do you learn to be a scuba diver?
Oh, I'm glad you asked, Chris.
Oh, thank you.
I appreciate that. Well,
I'm so good at segues.
One of the things that we do here is we call it, oh boy, and it just went away from me.
Of course.
Discover Scuba. Of course, it came back. Discover Scuba. And what we will do is for, typically it's around the cost of the pool. We will outfit you in gear. We'll take you to the pool and we'll let you try to scuba dive for usually somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes and find out if you like it. So your investment becomes about $25, $35.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had people that go, this is awesome. This is incredible. And I've had people going, nah, not so much. I don't like this. I don't like the confined, this is not for me.
Right.
And we go, okay, you're not out any money.
Right.
So, because you need to own your fins, your mask, and kind of the personal side of the gear. You need to own that first.
Okay.
You can rent a wetsuit. You can rent the buoyancy compensating device. You can rent the regulator. You can rent the tanks, and do all of that. But you do have to own a certain amount of equipment on your own. And that, depending upon how much you want to spend, will go between $200 and probably $400. If you want to get all of the gear, you're now talking probably about $1,200 to $1,500 investment. And then the dive training itself, which will be in the $300 range. So, it's not an insignificant piece. So we like that Discover Scuba.
Mm-hmm.
Let you get into it. Let you try it. And I've taken a number of cachers out to that Discover Scuba. And it's a great way to learn if you want to do it.
Nice. As you're talking, you're mentioning dive instructors that were, helping you find caches. Do most dive instructors know about dive caching, geocaching underwater? Or is it just the people you happen to be hanging out with?
I think if you're diving at a foreign destination, like I said, Honduras, the guys on the boat, you're out with a boat captain, you're out with a dive master who knows that area and knows what the things you can see and knows what to avoid in a particular area. They know about the caches. And so I would typically talk with the dive master and say, can we go to this site today? Because and they're like, oh, you want to do that cache? And I'm like, yes. When we were in the first trip we did to Cayman Island was the same kind of way. I really didn't have to say, I want to go to this wreck and tell them why. They said, we're going to this wreck. And I said, oh boy, this is why I want to go to that wreck. And I was talking with everybody around me. It really wasn't the dive master in that case that pointed it out. It was just one of our other group. So I think the answer is yes. Most of the dive masters, the people that live in that area and work in that area, know about it. Some of the tourists probably not so much.
Interesting.
Well, if you are a diver and don't know any other scuba folks that are into diving or into caching, is there a good way to find others that would want to hit some of these caches?
That's a great question. Because I haven't needed an answer for that question. There is there's a scuba website. I'll give them a plug if I can remember what the heck it's called. It's a forum kind of for scuba divers. Scuba Board, that's the name of it. It's real easy. And so on Scuba Board, you can say, I'm going to such and such a place. Does anybody want to join me? Anybody want to go diving on this particular day? You could also, when I did Power Island here in Michigan, which is, not an insignificant boat trip, I posted a note on the website and said, I'm going to be in Traverse City on this date and I want to go to Power Island. Anybody want to share the cost? So, and I had 6 people that said, yeah, let's go. So I would imagine you could do the same thing, saying, I'm going to be in Honduras across this week. Is there anybody that would, and usually finding divers isn't the hard part. Finding cachers that are also divers. I'm lucky enough that I have 4 dive buddies that are geocachers. And so when I call them up and say, hey, you want to go diving? They're like, yeah, where can we go? And I'm like, well, let's go to this lake because there's a new cache there. And they're like, oh, okay, great. And so off we go.
Interesting.
Cool. And I'm assuming you could probably post a note on the cache page itself and get some replies too. If someone else is watching it, you can conceivably find someone that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, for me, if it were something I really, really wanted to get, I would just go get it myself. So having that solo certification, lets me do that. So.
Well, it sounds like Bounce in the chat is a certified diver. He says the worst part of certification was taking my mask off and putting it back on underwater in the cold Puget Sound.
Ooh, yeah.
Is there a warm Puget Sound?
No.
I thought it was always cold.
It's always cold. It's always in the 40s. Doesn't matter. We've had 90-degree temperatures. And I remember in the
40s in Fahrenheit, not in Celsius.
Right. 40s in Fahrenheit.
Yes.
I remember when my kids were young, they go, oh, Dad, it's so hot. Can we go swim in the ocean? And I said, you can try. It's still really cold.
Yeah, it is really cold. I've gone to places where my daughter was actually working on a different certification, and I had to stay in one place while she swam a rope around me. And it got so cold, it was like eating ice cream and getting a brain freeze.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not enjoy that because I couldn't move. So, yeah. So, yeah, cold and I don't get along real well. And probably for a new scuba diver, that is the hardest thing to deal with, is taking that mask off underwater and realizing that you can't see, or you can't see very far.
Right.
But I've done it so many times now, it doesn't bother me at all. I'll take it off and swim without it for a while.
So Bounce always says, also says he should place one outside the octopus hole at Titlow Beach next to the Narrows Bridge. And if you're not familiar with the story, we have a bridge across the Tacoma Narrows. It's actually a very deep section of the Puget Sound, but it's the closest between land masses, and so they built a bridge there. Rumor has it there's a giant octopus that lives at the bottom of that. You've seen all the pictures or all the videos of Galloping Gertie where the bridge fell. That's that bridge span.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's a rumor that there's a giant octopus down there.
Well, I don't have the chat room up, so I'm going to have to find Bounce and
yeah.
Yeah, we're going to have to get together because I am coming out to Seattle. Rumor has it that 2020 there's going to be a reason to go out to Washington, and so
there's always a reason to come out to Washington.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, 2020 was especially compelling that I should do that.
Yes, you probably should.
Okay.
Though I don't know why.
Right.
I don't know why, and we don't even know when, aside from sometime in 2020.
Right. Well, I know when it's going to be. It's going to be the exact same. Yeah, it's going to be the exact same time that I'm going to be diving in the Galapagos Island.
Oh, well, of course it will be.
Because, of course, I know that. So, just because.
Yeah, it's Murphy's Law.
Right. So, yeah, we'll be in the Galapagos in 2020, and that is the first place where I've not found a dive cache. There's plenty of caches on all the different islands, a lot of earth caches, but there's no dive caches there. So that'll be my first trip without one.
Are there any earth caches underwater?
Not that. Oh, that's a good idea. I haven't found any.
I mean, you still have geology happening under the water.
Yes.
I wonder if there's some kind of rule in the earth caches that you can't do it if it requires climbing gear or diving gear or something like that. But I don't think there is.
Interesting.
I think you should be able to do it.
I've been wanting to place an earth cache, and there are so many earth caches around me that there's like no room. I'm going to have to look at that.
Well, I know
that idea. Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. I know in the Puget Sound there's a fault that goes right along the coast and right out into the water, and I'm like, ooh, a fault is always a good earth cache thing, but it would be underwater for the most part. I wonder how much of that fault line you can see.
Well, and I wonder how deep it is.
Mm-hmm.
The depth would be really the issue, because I wouldn't want to place one that had a technical requirement to it.
Mm-hmm.
Keep it to the recreational level so that more divers could enjoy it and more dive cachers could enjoy it. So if you're saying that trench is pretty deep,
well,
I'm guessing you don't know.
I'm talking two different things though.
Oh,
let's see. I just Googled underwater earth cache, and I see underwater sea adventure and earth cache in New Jersey.
Oh.
Is it actually a dive cache?
No, it's difficulty 1.5, terrain 2.
Oh no, that's not going to qualify.
No.
Bounce says it's a great idea for an underwater earth cache. I wonder if Land Monkey would be able to get it.
Ooh.
That would give Land Monkey a reason to learn how to, how to scuba dive, get his certification, and then go and do it.
Yeah, because he's an earth cache junkie.
He is indeed.
So that would be a way to do that. Well, I will let you guys know if I can figure out how to place an earth cache. Yeah,
that's going to be a cool idea for the next earth cache show too, if it actually works. We are going to drop all the links that you put in the show notes. So the 4 caches that you hid, and we've got the scuba board. Is there anything else that you want to let people know about before we skate out of here tonight?
Wow. No, like I said, 70% of the surface of the earth is covered by water. So if you really, really like getting away and walking in the deep woods, there's nothing like scuba diving. Whether it's up here in the cold of Michigan or the colder Puget Sound, or down in the warm Caribbean waters, it is just so relaxing and such an experience that you owe it to yourself to try it and at least discover scuba, if nothing else.
And Limax had an interesting question too that we'll ask you as a dive instructor. He said there was a diving school connected to one of the sports stores here. They had a pool to learn in, which I'm not sure is necessarily a good thing. What's your take on learning in a pool versus learning in like a quarry?
Well, you have to learn in a pool, or typically you learn in a pool. Again, there's three phases to learning how to scuba dive. The first one is classroom based. So you learn about the gear and what the gear does. You learn about the physics of diving, how air pressure changes as you go up and down the water column and things like that. The second part of that we do in a pool. And whether it's a pool in a dive shop or a pool at a school, pool at a college, what we do there is we teach you how to take your mask off. How, when your mask gets water in it, how do you get the water out of your mask? What happens if you lose the regulator out of your mouth? How do you recover it? How do you get it back? How do you start breathing again? So all of those skills are done in the pool where it's safe, and where at worst case you stand up and continue to breathe. The kind of the final exam part of the experience is where you actually go into the open water, and we become less about teaching you and more about you showing us that you know how to do the skills. So absolutely, the pool is the best way to do that, and almost required.
Very good. So there you go, Limax. And then, Chris, did you have something else that you wanted to note?
I may have found a underwater earth cache. It's a geothermal scuba. That's GC3 Delta Papa 13. I've lost it now. It's in Indonesia though, but there may be an example of one.
It is. They have geothermal activity. Yeah. The difficulty is only 2.5. So I guess it's not real hard. You just have to get they do their DT ratings a little differently. Ours are always a 5.5. Because from the difficulty perspective, you have to have special gear, and the trainer requires you to have special gear. So we just automatically put them as a 5.5. So it's interesting that they didn't, but well done, Chris. I like that. Now I have a reason to go into Indonesia.
There you go. But more importantly, we now have a precedent.
Yes.
For an underwater earth cache.
Well, but remember, there is no precedent in geocaches.
No, yeah.
So it's just an example.
2012.
Okay.
But I'm still going to try.
Absolutely. But yeah, there is at least one other earth cache that requires diving, so that's a good sign.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thanks again for joining us and giving us so much great information. And I'm sure there's so much more that people are going to want to learn about scuba caching in general and dive caching. So if they need to contact you, can they do that through the profile on geocaching.com?
Absolutely. Yep. And as you know, I'm also part of the Michigan Geocaching Organization, so they can find me there. August's challenge is a little bit easier. You only have to find 5 caches this month. So a lot of different ways to play that. So yeah, either through MyGo or through my profile. And I'd love to go diving with a cacher.
Cool. Speaking of which, on the MyGo challenge, though, I have yet to find any caches this month. I was looking at the requirements. I'm like, I need to do this because it's easy enough, and I've yet to find any caches.
Daryl, you're a new podcast. I'm proud of you.
Hey, I found over 100 caches last month. I want to say like 125 or something last month.
And you didn't put in for the Stars Challenge?
No, I didn't.
I see that.
And that's just a matter of I was too lazy.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
I had to renew my membership in Migo last month too. So at least I got that much done.
There you go. Well, thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much. This has been a very informative and entertaining show.
Oh, good. I hope so. That was my goal. And
Now,
I appreciate you having me on.
I appreciate having you on. If you guys want to help the show, please leave us reviews on iTunes. Now, we want honest reviews. You don't have to give us 5 stars. I think we've earned them, but you don't have to give them. We want an honest review more than we want a 5-star review. And also let your geocaching friends know about the cool shows and maybe even cold shows of Puget Sound dive caching and all the great information you get from them.
And we've got a number of great shows coming up, including next week is our randomized show, which means whole bunches of good topics to talk about, many of them coming directly from our listeners and viewers. So if you have anything you'd like us to talk about, whether it's an article you found that's interesting, something that you don't know much about and want some tips on, or whether it's tips that you want to share, any of that kind of feedback, send that in to GeoGearHeads@cachemaniacs.com for next week's show. And you know what? We've got some trackables here that we're going to give away too. So you might get one of those trackables if we use your feedback, whatever that is, on the show. Then on the 23rd, we're going to be talking about geodogs with GSM ×2 and Stardust. I'm looking forward to that because I want my dog to be a geodog. And then on August 30th, episode 348, we're going back to Cache Tour. This time, Plato Attic and R. Reagan are going to continue the discussion that we started on the last show with a bunch more tips and tricks for that awesome service.
Until then, make sure you check out the Cachemaniacs website at cachemaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes for this and all our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners. So leave us feedback by emailing GeoGearHeads at cachemaniacs.com or through the many channels of social media. Your support helps keep the Cachemaniac shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link on our website to support the Cachemaniac shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Umfenauer and Daryl Wattenberg. The show's copyright 2018 by Daryl Wattenberg. All rights reserved.
Cache with the Cachemaniacs.